For those of us who knew Arsene Wenger in his prime, it was difficult to watch him after the second 3-0 defeat by Manchester City in 5 days. He looked tired and defeated, a long way from the young man I remember at Monaco, full of energy, ideas, and passion. It was like watching a slow death of a reputation. He was only 38 when I joined Monaco, just 10 years older than me. And as I was one of the senior players, on the long coach journeys or plane trips we would end up in long conversations over every aspect of life, not just football. He was interested in your ideas. Few had heard of him in England. When he got the Arsenal job in 1996, it was still a case of Arsene who, even though he had pretty much discovered and nurtured George Weah, winner of the 1995 Ballon d'Or, and had taken Monaco to the Champions League semi-finals. But Arsenal's then vice-chairman david.He would be in Monaco often, checking in with Arsene and keeping track of his progress when he went to manage Grampus 8 in Japan. David would ring me often to ask about Arsene, and I couldn't speak more highly of him. His attention to detail was phenomenal, especially in physical fitness, diet and conditioning. I was fitter at 28 than I had ever been at Tottenham. This was clearly a bright young coach who was going to make an impact. Many things we take for granted now around muscle recovery, massage, extended warm downs, dynamic stretching were all in Arsene's repertoire 30 years ago. And he changed English football when I came back. I remember conversations with the bemused Tony Adams and Ian Wright when he arrived. His spectacles meant he was nicknamed Le Professor, but I knew he would have the steeliness to make the changes he needed. He was passionate and could be aggressive. I've seen him lose it in the dressing room and start throwing things around. That's not a side of his management we ever really saw in England, though you can tell it's lurking beneath the surface, so determined is he to win. All of which has made the last few years painful. I was hoping he would go out on a high last year after that excellent FA Cup final victory against Chelsea. That would have been fitting, a record 7th FA Cup, and a 3rd in 4 years. It wasn't like the league titles of old and his great teams, but it was enough to leave with his pride intact. Had he done so, he could easily have moved into international football. Though he lives and breathes football and seems suited to club management, I'm sure he will be a success even now, if he does take on a national team. I think he'll find the rhythm suits him. And who couldn't need a break after 22 years at that level this season? There is now just the Europa League left, with a Champions League slot via the top 4 slipping away. If he were to reach that final, win it and leave with a trophy, many would see that as fitting for all that he has given Arsenal and English football. But at the moment Arsenal are a house divided, torn apart by the drawn-out nature of the end of this era. They say the weather was to blame for the half-full Emirates on Thursday, but it didn't seem to stop the City fans. It looks as though he lacks a strong figure to tell him the hard truths. And I don't think he's been as effective since 'He was forced out of the club in 2007. They were a great duo. Arsene took the lead, but David played an extraordinary role behind the scenes, fixing transfers and being close enough to Arsene to challenge him, as well as recruiting him in the first place. I'm not sure he's had that since. The only way I think you could put it to Arsene is to remind him how he treated great players like Dennis Bergkamp and Patrick Vieira. When the time came, he wasn't afraid to drop them or sell them. Think what they had achieved for the club and what wonderful players they were. Yet when it came to it, Arsene was willing to sell Patrick to Juventus because he thought his time was up. He used Dennis sparingly, keeping him hanging on yearly deals on the basis that he wasn't a long-term prospect. Nor is Arsene now. Like a player in the winter of his career, he looks a shadow of himself. I hope someone can deliver the message he himself has had to give to so many wonderful players down the years.